Hello, welcome to the Loney Show. I'm your host, John Loney, and in this episode, we're gonna have to bring on regular Asperegoose. Now, he's not here right now because, well, typical regular stuff. But anyway, with our guest, he is from Ontario, Canada. He's a full-time fantasy author. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Richard Stevens.
Hey, Johnny, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
It's great having you here. So, how's life?
Oh, life's very good. It's very cold here in Canada. I'm not sure what your temperature is there, but we are about, well, I guess we're -4 Celsius right now, which is very warm for us lately. We were down to -30 last night.
Oh, okay. Temperature where I am is kind of mild right now. It was slightly colder like a few weeks ago, but starting to get warm as we start to approach spring and summer. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to the warmer weather for sure, but it'll be another month here.
Yeah. So, tell me about what you do for a living.
I am a full-time fantasy author, so I get up in the morning and I edit and do social media, and then I get myself set up for writing. And around lunch hour, I'll either pause for lunch or I'll start writing, and then I'll write through the afternoon. And that's basically my day, Monday to Friday.
Oh, cool. And what got you starting to write fantasy books?
Fantasy books, in 1982, on a November evening, I was sitting in my room as a teenage boy. I'd quit school because I had to get a job to support my son that was on the way, and a song by Iron Maiden, "Run to the Hills," came on the radio that night, and for some reason it just spurred a fantasy story in my head. And
Oh,
that
cool.
story sat with me for about 35 years until I was actually finally able to write it after having 5 kids and 2 careers. So I didn't actually publish it until 2018.
Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Now, now, in terms of what books you've written, what each one have you written are about?
Oh, they're all in the same universe, so it's called the Soulforge universe. And the first series was only supposed to be a trilogy, and that was it. But halfway through book 3, Into the Madness, one of the main characters who, like I say, I had this story in my head for 35 years. When I finally got to write it, one of the main characters halfway through book 3 did something so bizarre that the ending that I knew was supposed to end the series was gone, and a dragon came into the story. And at that point, that dragon opened up about 30, 35 books in my head that I had to write the backstory of what happened to get to this point. So for 1,000 pages of the first 2.5 books, there's not mention of a significant creature like a dragon, and all of a sudden a dragon's in the story. And I wanted to explain to the readers why not. So that is what I've done since then. I keep going backwards. It's almost like Star Wars came out in '77. They keep going backwards with Phantom Menace, and then beyond that. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm starting to write the lore of the Soulforge universe.
Great. So, Asperegoose has just entered the recording studio, and maybe you can tell him more about your work.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was a bit late. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No,
No
it's
worries.
fine. It's fine, Asperegoose. It happens to a lot of the regulars in each episode, so it's perfectly fine.
I didn't have
As
no
long as you're
notifications
here.
on, so I just did. So yeah, what were you talking about?
So Richard Stevens is a full-time fantasy author, and we're just discussing about his work, what books he's written, and what they're about.
Okay.
You want to
Nice.
ask him any questions?
Hello.
Asperegoose, are you still here?
Oh shit, guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fuck.
Is there
So,
any questions you want to ask him?
Yeah, I mean, like, so you generally focus on fantasy novels, yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So, generally, like, how many books have you written so far? Like, are you working with like a diverse like fantasy, like number of fantasy genres, like dark fantasy, comical fantasy, that kind?
Yeah, no, I'm all epic fantasy. So epic fantasy, high fantasy. Mine is all quest-driven fantasy. So when people ask me, I let them know that it's more in line with Lord of the Rings or The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. It's not quite like Game of Thrones, where Game of Thrones is more about the battle of the houses, whereas mine's more about people going across different lands on quests, looking for certain things.
Yeah, so it's people, going on an adventure, basically, taken out of their comfort zone and then like going somewhere new land.
Oh, definitely, yeah. The very first story that I was telling Jeremy was about it's called the Soul Forge saga, and book 1 is called Soul Forge, and it's all about a disgruntled hero who many years before the book takes place, he went out and saved the kingdom. The kingdom was in dire need of being rescued from an evil sorcerer who was trying to take over. He went out, and while he was saving the kingdom, someone murdered his family. So he came back and found that, and he washed his hands of anything to do with the king or the people around him. And for 20 years, he sat and drank and just kind of commiserated with his loss. And then the kingdom needed him again, and they tried to get him to come out of retirement. And of course, he turned his nose up at it at first. But not to ruin the story, an old man finds him and he talks him into coming back out of retirement to once again pick up the sword in the king's name. And everything else has gone on from that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. That's a pretty good story. I really like that story. It's got some emotional kind of drive behind it. That's what you describe.
Yeah, he's a forgotten hero, and he deals with he's got a lot of demons of his own, obviously with his family being slain and his drinking problem, and his the people don't like him anymore because there's some more backstory that goes in through the story, or that the queen dies a couple of years before because he refused to come out of his retirement to help save them, and of course the people blame him for the death of their beloved queen. So he's got a lot going on in the background.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, great.
But like I say, when I was writing book 3, a dragon came into the story, and then so I went back and I wrote Rika's Flight, the Legends of the Lurker series, and it's all about one woman's quest to save the dragons. The book's Rika's Flight starts when she's 6 years old. She quickly grows up, and she's trained to hunt dragons because dragons are fierce creatures that eat people. And at some point in her evolution, becoming a young woman, she realizes that what they're doing to the dragons is wrong. And she decides that she wants to save the dragons from the king and his men. So then she becomes part of the focus of the dragon hunt. So they're not only hunting the dragons, they're also hunting her to prevent her from saving the dragons. And so this is the story that explains to the reader where the dragons went when you enter the Soulforge saga.
Amazing. Great.
I like that.
You were saying, Asperegoose?
Yeah. I'm just saying, that's a pretty good storyline. So, like, what's your future plans, for like the novels, and what's your future projects?
Well, there's probably another 20-25 books to come in the Soulforge universe. So the whole universe takes place over a couple thousand years, and it's all about the rise and fall of the dragon. So I generally write them in trilogies. And in some trilogies, the dragons aren't even there. Like, they're not present at all because of what's happening in their evolution. And then obviously they come back in the very last book. So the first series I wrote is actually the last series in the overall series. So right now I'm writing about the rise of an elf queen, and it actually takes place before Rika's Flight. And when I was writing the Legend of the Lurker series, I mentioned the 700-year-old elf queen. I'm thinking, I'd like to write her story. So I think the problem I have when I write a book is that every time I'm writing one book, I get 2 or 3 more in my head, and it's always going backwards. I always want to explain. I want to write the story of this one person that I might mention in history. So I don't think I'll ever finish the series per se.
Cool. And sorry, go on, Asperegoose. You were saying something?
Oh no, I just said nice. I like it. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, where would you see yourself 20 years from now?
Where would I see myself 20 years from now? I'll still be writing. I'll be an old man at that point. But I don't think I'll ever retire. I might slow down. But like I say, I've got about 20-25 books that I know already that I want to get out. So I will focus on that. I generally write 2 to 3 books a year. So that's 6 to 8 years before I get that done, and where I go from there, I don't know.
Great. Now, throughout your entire journey as an author, what were your high and low points?
The high point was actually holding Soulforge in my hand. Like I say, I had that book in my head for about 35, 36 years. And when I was young, like I started writing when I was 9, so that was in the 1970s. And back then, like, we didn't have Amazon, we didn't have any of those ways for little people like me to actually publish a book. Unless you got picked up by the big 5, you weren't getting published. So it was really a pipe dream back then. I just wrote them for my own enjoyment. I read them to my children, and that was the extent of it. I was happy that there were my stories alone. But with the advent of the internet and then Amazon and KDP and everything else, where anyone can publish a book, I figured, well, hey, I can do this. So I worked in a local bakery for 22 years, and then I went back and got my high school education, and I became a member of our local police service, and I did that for 12 years, and that was too stressful. So with the help of my loving wife, I was able to leave that career and now write full time. But the high point was definitely when I answered the door and there was a box of Soulforge, and opening the box and actually seeing that book after 35 years of being in my head was something special.
Excellent. Did you have any role models when you were growing up?
As far as authors, probably Terry Brooks and Stephen R. Donaldson. They're two fantasy authors, very famous fantasy authors. They have a very amazing series. The great world building. The characters are memorable, and I always adored their stuff. And I would never put myself up in their category. They're the foundations of the fantasy genre, but I aspire and hope that my books, may come close to theirs someday.
Great.
Also, like the stories you have in your books and like your books in general, like are they inspired to some extent by events happening in the real world? Like, are you inspired by what's happening right now, like in America or in like Europe or something? Like, is it going to inspire your narrative?
No, not necessarily. I wrote the Bainbridge companion novels. In the Soulforge saga, I have a bunch of minor characters that are very memorable. And when COVID hit, I was supposed to do a research trip to England and Scotland to research witchcraft and superstitions of the 15th and 16th century. And it was slated for May of 2020, and COVID derailed that. So I couldn't write that series. And I asked my fans which minor character they would like to see a story written about. And most of them said this female archer named Sidira, because in halfway through Into the Madness, which is book 2 in the Soulforge saga, I mentioned that she has a very dark history, but I never tell the reader what it is. And they all say, what's her dark history? So I figured, okay, I got to write her story. And it might have something to correlate with what's going on with our world in the last couple of years, where, it seems like there's a cloud over the world, and we're looking for some kind of light, some kind of hero to maybe pull us through all this. So her story might have had something to do with that. And I even signed the books at the beginning. There's little sayings that I put at the front of the books, and it has something to do with what was going on with COVID. But it also has something to do with the book. So each of my books, when I sign them for people, they have a little saying, and generally the saying is about life and also about the book. So
great, incredible. Has being an author had always been your dream job?
Yes, definitely. When I was 9 years old, like I say, I was a little kid, and it was summer vacation, and we're bored stiff as you normally are after 2 months of sitting around doing nothing. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I used to like reading Hardy Boy books by Franklin Dixon. And I had a book sitting beside me, and I'm thinking, I could probably write something like that. So that is what I started doing. And I wrote all through my younger years into my teenage years. Started, wrote a little bit as an adult, but when you have 5 kids and 2 careers, the kids take priority over what I really want to do. So that stuff got put on the back burner. But in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to write a book. Obviously it'd be nice if I could make money doing it, but my biggest goal at the time was just to get the book out there.
That's great. Have you been on anything interesting, like any interesting trips lately?
Lately, no, I haven't done anything lately. But I was mentioning before we went on that and don't hold this against me, I know you guys are from Manchester. I'm a Manchester United fan, and I watched them. I don't watch any TV, but I watched Manchester United play soccer. Whenever they're on, I try to watch. I don't miss a game. And we had a trip to Scotland. My wife's Scottish, but we had to design the trip around the last game of the season, the Day of Champions in the Premier League, and everything evolved around Manchester playing Bournemouth in 2015. And we wined and dined. We got the VIP package, so we spent a lot of money that we shouldn't have. But it was a great experience. We got sat down, and we're in, I'm in a three-piece suit, she's in a dress, and as we're sitting there watching the stands, if you're familiar with Old Trafford, it says Manchester United in white seats, and I wanted to get a picture of that, and we got out there too late, and I couldn't see it. And a little bit of time went by, and all of a sudden I looked across the stadium, and I could see it. I go, that's odd. And the next thing you know, we could see these tails of dogs above the seats running around the stadium, and that seemed even odder. And then next thing I know, 78,000 people were being evacuated from Old Trafford, and they abandoned the game for a bomb threat. I guess someone found a bomb in one of the bathrooms, and that was the end of that game. So that was probably my most interesting trip. We did not get to see the game. And then in 2020, when I was supposed to do that research trip, we again booked the whole trip around the very last game of the season because that game doesn't change. And that got canceled again because of COVID. So I've tried to take in a Manchester United game twice, and two times something totally unprecedented has derailed that. So that's probably the most exciting part of our trip.
Yeah. Question is, do you find football, or soccer as you call it, more entertaining than what they do in America? The NFL and all that.
Oh, definitely. And sorry, I should say football. I'm North Americanized, so I call it soccer. But soccer or football is, from a Canadian's point of view or North American point of view, when you first see the game, it seems so boring because you get 1-0 games and you got a 22-foot net, 7 feet high or 8 feet high. You figure, how can they not score? And then when you actually go out and play the game and you appreciate the skill it takes to take a round ball and a round foot 40 yards across the field and bring it down without it bouncing, and once you appreciate the game, you absolutely fall in love with it. And I, being Canadian, of course, my first love was hockey, and now I will only watch football or soccer. That's all I watch. I don't watch hockey. I don't watch American football. I don't watch baseball. I just watch soccer because I appreciate the game so much.
Because there's so many American football teams that you just can't really identify which one you love most. But there's actual teams in the UK, football teams that you like in some way. Like, for example, I kind of like Chelsea, so I can identify it easily.
You and I would have fun in a room when they were both playing because we'd be cheering for the other team. But no, I do like some of the underdog teams. I did like Middlesbrough until they just knocked Manchester out of the FA Cup. I generally cheer for Manchester United. Obviously, I will cheer for the underdog teams like Man City when they used to be poor. They're not poor anymore, so I don't cheer for them anymore. But Leicester, when they came up and out of the blue, all of a sudden won the Premier League. That was kind of a fairy tale. That was fun to watch. But I will cheer for some of the underdogs. But I'm through and through a Manchester United fan.
Oh, but you would love cheering for Newcastle United because those guys, they have barely gotten out of relegation.
Who's that?
Newcastle United.
Sorry, I can't hear the name that you're saying.
Newcastle United.
Oh, Newcastle. Yeah. When I first started watching soccer, Newcastle United was a pretty big team at that point. They were one of the most famous teams in the world. I'm sure they still are. They still have a big fan base, but they're struggling, and I think they might make it. They should probably stay up this year. They're starting to pull it around, but I don't mind cheering for Newcastle as long as they're not playing Manchester.
Well, unfortunately, now that Newcastle has been bought by Saudis, I expect harsher punishment for failing games. Unfortunately, I don't like the fact that Newcastle has been bought by Saudi Arabia. So I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, the connection just seems a bit staticky on the side. I'm having trouble hearing you.
I just keep hearing radiation sound. I don't know what, that radiation meter. Just keep hearing it for some reason. So also, I don't know what's wrong with the communication for me.
Okay, sorry. It's very hard to understand what's going on right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, have you done anything else in your free time besides writing?
No, I do it full time. So, we like biking, kayaking, going for walks. Before COVID, we used to go on vacations all the time too. But right now we're just happy to get outside once in a while when the sun shines. And being in Canada, like I say, the last month has been dreadfully cold. So it was minus 30 degrees Celsius for the last couple nights. So we don't go too far because it's too icy underfoot.
Cool.
They're very cold. Yeah.
Which recent news story have you found most interesting?
What recent news story? I would imagine the world's following it is the trucker convoy in our capital city in Ottawa in Canada has certainly been taking up all the headlines. It looks like they're finally de-escalating that, but that and the conflict that's hopefully does not happen in the Ukraine is the two things that stick out in my mind, other than COVID, obviously.
Great. Are you a cat person or a dog person?
Cat. And
Okay.
funny part about that is long before I ever wrote about dragons, I never meant to write tropes like dragon tropes. I didn't want to be that guy who wrote about dragons because everyone else does. And like the dragon came into my story in book 3, and that's when I started writing about them. But long before then, I have a cat, and she's still around. She's 17 years old. I have a hutch on my desk, and she'd jump on my desk up on the hutch, and then I have a speaker on top of that. So she'd jump on top of that, and she'd look down at me. And I used to call her my little lurker because she was lurking on me. And when I came to write the first dragon in my series, the dragon, when it first meets Rika, is he's perched on an old stump high above this trail that she's walking on. And it startles her and she frightens her, but he's looking down at her, and she calls him Lurker. So the main dragon in my series is named after the cat.
Okay. Cool. Incredible. Now, if you had to pick between skydiving, bungee jumping, or scuba diving, which one would you choose?
Oh, scuba diving for sure. I am a scuba diver, so it's I'm 56 now, so skydiving and bungee jumping don't really hold any allure to me. But scuba diving is a very great sport. It's so calming when you get underneath the water. A lot of people think it might be claustrophobic, but it's definitely not that. I would compare it to skydiving if I was ever a skydiver, because you're just kind of floating in this big sea of blue, and it's just so calm. So definitely scuba diving.
Right. What was the funniest joke you've heard?
The funniest joke. I'm not a good joke teller, and probably the funniest joke that I've ever heard. I would screw it up, and 2, it might not be rated for this show. So, as much as I
What do you mean? Is it like dark humor or something?
yeah, no, it's not dog humor. It's but it would be very X-rated. So I'll just leave it at that. And I'm
What's this podcast rating? What's this podcast rating? Is it like PG-13 or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be probably a bit higher than that, maybe 18. Although your ratings might be different over in the British Isles than they are over here in Canada. You guys have page 3 here in the Sun. We don't have stuff like that over
Okay. Understandable. What was the best pair of shoes you've owned?
The best pair of shoes I've owned?
Yeah.
Probably some slip-on loafers. So I didn't have to tie them up and didn't have to worry about them coming untied. It's just something you can slide in with your jeans or dress pants. And
Yeah, I agree.
mm-hmm.
I prefer slippers and over anything else because I can't be bothered with tying laces.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, it's just nice to just slide into them away you go. Yeah.
So, what has been the highlight of your week?
The highlight of my week was definitely doing this show.
Oh, thank you.
It's a great honor.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So, I'm not sure what to ask you now. Got every sentence in the book.
What's that?
There's always room for one more, but my brain has been pretty much run dry. So,
no worries.
Actually, what is the most ridiculous fact you know?
The most ridiculous fact I know. Oh God, I know a lot of ridiculous, useless facts. Being in Canada, and we're speaking about the cold, and the name is gonna escape me now, but I learned a little while ago that you guys probably don't get this too often, but when you're driving around the snow collects in ice in your wheel well, and then you kick the ice off so it's not rubbing against your tires. And there's a name for that piece of ice, and I can't. Is it something like a chud or something like that? And I just heard that recently. I never knew there was an actual name for these things, but
Okay. Cool. Abiuso, what was the worst hotel that you stayed in?
the worst hotel that we stayed in. I don't know if I can think of a worse hotel, but it's interesting that you mentioned that because I remember what really stuck out to me when I came over to England and Scotland in 2015. I'd never been over there before. Is that when we're in a hotel room, I guess you call them water closets? Is that what you call them? But
I think so. Yeah.
yeah. So when I went to have a shower, you actually had to step up into the tub, and then there's a button that you press to get the water to come out. And I was just thinking, it was so hard to step up into a watery, a wet, slick surface. I couldn't imagine how the seniors in England or Scotland can actually have a shower and try and navigate these water closets.
Yeah, you'll get used to it. A bit of
It was just totally
adjusting to
different than we
it.
have over here. Like ours is right here on the ground, and they're very low, so they're very easy to get into.
Yeah. And that's all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Richard, and telling about your greatest journey as an author and writing fantasy. It was great.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate being here.
Yeah. And until next time, stay tuned for more.